Hey, it's Russ Payton with Role-Playing Public Radio. This is RPPR episode 198, D20 Swinginess. And we're talking about D20 combat, which is because, special guest Caleb. How you doing there, Caleb?
I am the new Tom Church.
With me, not always, but frequently, Caleb. Yeah. We've been playing a lot last couple of months, D20 systems, 13th Age, which has not been posted, but we're doing a campaign of it where we're both players, and that's been fun. And then we are also, I ran a 2-part game of Lancer, Solstice Reign. First part is already up on the AP site. Part 2 is coming soon. And so we've been thinking a lot about D20 because it's been a hot minute before that since we last did D20 things.
Or an ever. But I think the only thing I've done that was D20 before that was
there's
Dark Sun.
Well, no, there was Iron Heroes.
Oh, Iron Heroes. Yeah, I forgot about Iron Heroes.
So that was definitely a whole thing that we did. And then Dark Sun before that. But that was about it. There's a lot to think about. Before we get into the main episode, though, I do want to mention a bit of news is that I am exporting the RPPR back catalog to YouTube. So I have a link to our YouTube channel where I've started exporting old episodes. I found a way to automate that. So that is useful because the RPPR catalog is a bit large. I would not want to manually export all those episodes.
Yeah, you are like a tech test to whatever your automating tool you're using.
Stress test.
Like there's some engineer in a room going, "What's happening? It's not meant to hold this much."
Oh, no, that is 100% it because I'm using an app called Headliner, which is I use it for audiograms, creating little videos out of podcast clips. And I literally have broken their system where I've tried to export certain episodes that were too long because I'm doing this thing where I'm trying to create a looping video instead of just having a static image held the entire time. And they're like, no, you can't do that. You have to make it shorter. So I've actually been in contact with the developer. So to be like, oh, no one else is doing this. Kind of the implication of why are you doing this? Yeah. It's great.
Man, I'm just imagining Headliner, we're all good to go. We can handle any podcast now. And you awaken like a lich in Underworld, like the sleeper, the podcast awakens.
Yeah. No, it's 3 episodes a day is what the automated system does. So it's going to take it months to get through everything. And I haven't even started RPP actual play because I haven't figured out the right template. Anyways, that's my news. I'll have a link to our YouTube channel and I'll set up playlists. And so you can listen to all the older stuff. If you haven't, it is older, but eventually it'll catch up and you'll be able to listen to everything on YouTube.
Catch up on Ross's robot slaves, ferrying files over to Google.
Yeah. Basically
endlessly, day and night.
Well, hopefully not endlessly. Hopefully there will be an end. Hopefully their catalog is large. It is not infinite, though. It is not Borges' infinite podcast.
I don't know. You haven't been back there in a while.
You know what? That's true. It's probably multiplied. There's probably entire seasons of stuff that is what the fuck? What? I don't remember this. Yeah. But Caleb, any news on your end in the realm of games and podcasting and all that junk?
Oh, yeah. Dead Channels remain strong. We've posted a couple of games for God's Teeth left. So we're about to have the whole campaign up by the end of the summer. And we've posted all the one-shots and play tests for the single standalone scenarios that are tied to that campaign if you want access to those. And then on Heaven on Games Open Design, which only has 90 patrons currently, and one of them could be you. We are play testing the second edition of Red Markets and continuing posting that campaign. So those episodes are up for free, but if you want access to the early chapters of second edition, and coming soon, art from Patsy McDowell, the original book of the campaign. That will be posted up on Heaven on Games Open Design, HGod on Patreon.
Nice. What kind of rules are already available to patrons?
I currently have the new character creation rules and the new dice system.
Yeah.
Alteration of the dice system. And this month I'm putting up the negotiation chapter.
Yeah, you could be one of the first people to play second edition Red Markets or the beta of it, the alpha, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not a beta yet. Yeah. I am releasing it in pieces, and whatever I don't have released, use the old book. that's the current plan. That's how I'm doing it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we still use the old book, especially for the gear and stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of ship of Theseusing the game. No.
Yeah. So yeah, D20. Speaking of dice and games and things, that's what this podcast is about. Is what I've been told. This really came to a head in Lancer, because we played a 2-part game of Lancer, the scenario Solstice Reign, which is meant to be introductory for people new to the game, and the Lancer and I love the setting, I love the aesthetic. I just have realized I do not love D20 combat in its sort of the iteration that Lancer has, which is heavily derived from 4th Ed D&D, and the sort of like.
I'm going to take your word on that.
Yeah. Well, you played some 4th Ed D&D.
I mean, it was a bit ago.
Yeah.
And also it was like my first RPG.
Yeah.
So I remember almost nothing.
Yeah. But like some characteristics are grid-based combat, and all the abilities are based on like how many squares they are. That's how distances are measured. Then rolling a D20, adding a number, usually, some sort of modifier based on your character abilities and what particular ability they're using, versus a moving target number. The target number being the armor, the defensive stat of the enemy you're targeting. And if you succeed, then there's a separate roll for damage, sometimes mitigated by an enemy ability or like passive damage reduction, although not always. And that's sort of like the main paradigm of these systems, and they're very common because obviously that's what D&D does. That's what a lot of RPGs do. Like I mentioned, we're also playing 13th Age, which is meant like, what if we made D&D good? What if we got rid of the D&D isms and made it more playable, or at least yeah.
I would start off by saying that this is not a critique of Lancer as a piece of game design. I think it's remarkably balanced for what it is in a lot of ways. But it is a sort of attempt to elucidate like why basic D20 combat just does not do it for me. And I don't think I've ever seen a game that does it for me. And Lancer, in the cleanness of its design in so many other ways, it sort of makes that apparent to me, because this is working as intended and I still don't like it, which isn't a critique of the design. It's a critique of my tastes. Because, like I have a swingy dice mechanic. The Prophet system is a remarkably swingy dice mechanic, because you've got two numbers literally fighting each other, but I'm only adding to one side of it. And then you also have these resources like will and dissociated mechanics and things you can spend your way out of problems with. But you're giving a second choice point to mitigate the miserable. I roll a 1, I roll a 2, I roll a 3, I roll a 1, I roll a 4, I roll a 3. Yeah, like that endless loop of failure can be broken up. And boy, howdy, a lot of people don't like that. They don't like resource management. They don't like dissociated mechanics. And I get that. But I also don't like D20. And I have so many reasons why. And you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, no, I do. But
it's not a critique of Lancer or designers. If you ever want someone to write for Lancer, fucking call me. The line is open. But yeah, D20 combat, man. Whew.
Yeah.
Not for me.
No, I mean, and there made me think about like what I like in combat in RPGs and what I don't like. And yeah, I don't like, there's also a difference for running a D20 game versus playing a D20 game, because I think
I've done both. I have also run Lancer. So
yeah. Do you have a preference now that you've been on both sides of the screen, so to speak?
Oh, I prefer running it because I don't feel like as much of an abject failure.
Yeah, I think
when I roll shit dice, despite making the best passable tactical decision available at the moment, and the character still wins, like at least the character won, and like I can describe a cool moment. Unlike when I'm playing and I just sit there for another turn for 40 minutes. Yeah,
I think that's the thing, right? Like I prefer running it too, because I'm never like waiting. Like I prefer to be engaged and active in games, and I know that's obviously not every player's preference.
Also, that does not negate the problems of a D20 combat when you're running it. It just changes them.
Well, you're not sitting around like you're.
But I have critiques on that end too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But yeah, when you're there are players, as you mentioned, that like, I want to roll a die once and then I don't have to do anything for another 10 minutes. You know, like they're more social, casual players, or they don't like thinking too much in the game. Like there's some game design mechanics are meant to increase tension and anxiety. And then there are some players that are absolutely allergic to that, any kind of anxiety. Like there are players who won't play gumshoe games because they don't like the idea of spending a point and then not having it later on. You know, like it's the exact same kind of thing, I think. But in terms of D20, like, yeah, some of the characteristics are you roll. And then if you fail the roll, nothing happens unless it's a critical failure. Like, I think a lot of D20 is based on this natural 1, natural 20 phenomenon, right? Like, and that's become such an ingrained part of gaming culture to a degree. You know, the critical hit, the critical failure. I mean, like, it seems like a third of all D&D/RPG humor is like, they rolled a natural 1 or a natural 20, and then something wacky happened. And,
Again, I've designed a system with a 5% fuck up and a 5% super success. And it's wonderful. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No complaints on there. It's just all those other failures. Those many other failures.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, what's your critique here? Like, I have it in like various segments. Like, I have areas where I think D20 combat isn't serving a certain type of player. But I don't know what you want to talk about.
I think what I sort of did a sort of mental survey of like what combat in RPGs I do like. And I do like red markets. And I think in red markets because there's always this tension of like resource management that you're always not just like your literal resources, like your ammo and your rations and, you know, whatnot, and your willpower, but also like the resources of your actions and being able to like have that. Do I go full offense or do I reserve my twitch? And so it's also brief too. Like every action has consequences. Every fights never seem to linger too long. Like there's never a thing in red markets of just roll and miss. Because eventually people run out of energy or ammo or both.
And we've also cut out initiative in the new system, I should say, for people who are familiar with the old one.
Yeah, exactly. And that definitely helps.
Which Lancer does as well, which I think is smart.
Yeah. But then other games I like Delta Green because you don't have resources, but you do have the action economy. And there's this massive, the most brilliant thing Delta Green did was that you choose to attack or defend. Like if you dodge, that's it. You don't get to fucking do anything. And also like the whole melee thing is just like a single opposed roll, the fight back thing. So which is simplifies things tremendously and also characters don't have a bloated HP. I think actually that's another thing in D20.
Lethality damage in Delta Green. The old Detweilerin panel response of show me the place on your body you can get hit with a bullet and not die. Speed is a quality in and of itself.
And even in red markets too, like usually enemies go down in a few hits and your character can take a lot of hits if they get hit if they're distributed right, but like they're not invincible. So there's that. I like feng shui combat because it is operatic and like cinematic and like, but you still have the sort of action economy.
Is that D20?
No, that feng shui is not. No, these are all the systems I mentioned so far are not D20. In fact, I can't think of a D20 system with combat that I like now that I've experienced Lancer enough to really judge it, I think. And I like Lancer in theory, but like in practice, no. And we'll get into that. One of the other systems I like that I've done a lot of combat in is Eclipse Phase, both editions, because during character generation, you have the option of making a combat machine, but even a combat machine, is even if you min-max them all the way to hell and back, they still have a death spiral. You know, even if you could ignore some wound penalties and trauma penalties, eventually you're going to weigh down, and you can kill a lot of things, but you're not invincible. You can still be brought down by things, and I think. So I like that tension in a Eclipse Phase where, you can be good at combat, but not invincible. And, but if you're not good in combat, you can still have some options to defend yourself, but you're not going to be like, the murder hobo, the invincible murder hobo can kill anything, get out of anything. Which happens in D20 stuff too, where eventually you make a broken combo and you're just like, aha, I can do anything. So those 4 systems all have good combat that I like, and D20 doesn't. And I think it comes down to like having interesting choices and certain speed. And so I think it comes down to that, like interesting choices at character generation and during the game or during the fight. And then there's this speed, like every D20 game has that, or at least the ones we played that have had hit point bloat. Like even Lancer, like you get those boss enemies with the ultra template or the veteran template, they get multiple structure points, and like it just takes multiple hits to bring them down. And it's just like, yeah, as opposed to Delta Green or Red Markets, where 1 or 2 hits is all you need usually, unless it's like unless it's a fucking thing you're not supposed to fight anyway, like a Shoggoth and Delta Green or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of like what thinking about combat I do like, and why D20 doesn't do that yet. And how would you propose changing that?
Well, I think it's to the causes for me. I think there's a type of combat that is the primary type of combat in terms of a narrative or conflict in a narrative that a RPG is going to emulate, or people are going to want to see it's emulated. And I think D20 is just fantastically bad at it. So for instance, like on your side of the table, when you were running it or when I was running it, you have so much to keep track of. Oh, yeah. And that's not a Lancer thing. That's a 13th Age thing. That's a D&D thing. This monster has individual powers. It's got its own hit number. It's got its own to-be hit number in defense. It's got
multiple types of defenses.
It's got ranges. It's got passive abilities, like the ever so fun, actually, if you hit this thing, you didn't, which is very great for somebody who just made a roll for the first time in 5 turns to be like, actually, no, that did nothing. Yeah. But the next person will be able to do something because you used its passive ability. So you're trying to keep straight of all that. You've got the terrain in front of you, right? And you're doing all that. And what I find that grid-based combat does, especially with enemies with this like wide variety of things, is like it's trying to emulate tactical choices. And it does that a lot on the back end for the GM. It makes a ton of tactical choices. It also does it a lot on the back end for the player in terms of character creation. What spells am I going to equip? What weapons are going to put on which mounts if I build my mech?
How do my powers interact?
Which actions am I going to do? All that kind of stuff. But in execution at the table, all of those choices are made outside of the table, and the table just deletes options. So what am I saying by this? You've got the map, and you're moving across the map. And you're like, I'm going to take a move action. You're like, move. And then I move 4 spaces. It is completely contextualist. I don't know what kind of ground I'm running on. I don't know if there's smoke in the air. I know the cover has a number on it. I know that, I don't know what sound it makes. I don't know if I ran over and kicked a bunch of cars if I'm in Lancer. I don't know if I'm, picking away across the magma river in D&D, because no one describes that, because the GM is playing a computer game in his head, trying to keep track of what to do next. The player is just trying to take their action. And what it ends up being is this minifig moves here. And I'm creating a story where I'm like activating the senses, like theater sight, sound, taste, touch, the things that you would like want to see if you were watching a movie of this. It becomes deleted. Like, whereas the non-choice of Delta Green, of just like, you want to fight or you want to hide, that's it. Once you establish that, there's so much room left, and then you'll have in the handler in that instance actually describe something that's going on, add anything to the tone, right? And you just don't do that in a D20 in most D20 games, not Lancer, not anything like that, because the choice points have to be so juggled that it just gets negated and put onto this map. And the map is always underwhelming compared to an evocative description. And I think we do like the thing of like, well, I know exactly what my range is now, as being like it's therefore the map is better because there's not confusion of like, where are they standing? What really counts as mid? Like, we're done with the rules lawyering shit. But all that stuff had to come into account from like wargaming. It had to come in from rules lawyering and like a lack of trust amongst your player group. You know, back before Robin Laws apparently told gamers that they could talk to each other before they started playing. Like, and it's just to me, it's an inferior story. Like every time, like if I hit in Lancer, you're so busy trying to figure out what goes next that it is my number goes against your number. And often it's your number goes against that number and this happens. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't. I just read this. This happens instead. Oh, wait, no, I looked this up, this rule. It just happened. This happens instead. And I have no idea what to imagine, what I saw, what my character felt in that moment, like what it looked like, nothing. Like it is math on math crimes that have zero contextual, like on the body writing. Like it's not felt. It's not emoted in. And I think that's just true of anything that's going to, where you're busting out the grid. I think the idea is that, well, we have a map now. Yeah. And the map will take care of so much of this evocative material. And like, I think players do that. And I think GMs do that. And I think it just never does. I think it just deletes description out of the combat and turns it into a little game. Yeah. And then it becomes the tactical game. And then I think your choices are flattened in D20 too, because I somewhat enjoyed the combat sometimes in Iron Heroes. I thought we did some interesting things there.
Right. There's a stunting mechanic.
And it's because there's stunting. And like, that's the other thing. There's a narrative to conflict and there's a narrative to conflict that people want to see. And the narrative of conflict that people want to see is not the average actual narrative of conflict, which means who trained the most or who went first. That's a real world conflict. It is, oh, I am 400 pounds more than you. I win. Like, it doesn't matter what you did. Like that's why weight classes exist.
My gun is the longer range. So.
Yeah. My gun is longer range. You cannot possibly hit me. I win. The U.S. military strategy. Yes. Like, again, not super exciting to watch. Or like heroic if you're just like, yeah, I killed him with a drone strike. Yay. Like, or just the, or the pick apart, which is comical. Like the Porco Rosso fight is what I call it. We're going to spend 20 minutes in the surf punching each other in the face. And that is for comic effect, but it's not in D20. That's your hit point bloat. Yeah. Like those are all types of combat that don't make compelling stories. Like, you know, the UAV strike where you cannot possibly be hurt back with no stakes. The endless grind of just who grinds down first. There's no tactical choice. And your numbers are going to do numbers. This fight was decided before you showed up. The training equivalent, which is this fight was decided when you made your character and learned the rules of Lancer, right? And then everything else is just executing it. And then even on that level, D20 fails a lot because like I've played Lancer before. I've run it on both sides. I didn't do it perfectly, but like I've read the full book multiple times. Like I know how quick actions work. I was trying to help instruct people while we were at the table, but it doesn't matter if you make a smart choice if you roll a 2. Yeah. Like it just completely deletes it. Like, and that's the thing. Like you have a simpler combat system and somebody comes up with a cool idea. You're just like, yeah. It's got only so many variables. I will add you this variable for doing this or take it away because you're in this negative situation. But like the only thing you can do to stunt in Lancer is grapple, which like mathematically is almost bad. Effectively useless compared to anything on your sheet. And so, you can't throw people off of stuff for the most part unless you have a different size and like you're way upper levels entirely specialized in it. And then, there's not a lot of tactical terrain things unless it's built into the map. You can't improvise that stuff as a player. And so like kind of deletes your player's cleverness, kind of deletes your cleverness in the game. And there's all sorts of stuff that like you can't do in a combat like that. And tell a cool story. Like, Raylan Givens in Justified is very good at shooting people, right? We all know that. It is not interesting when he just shoots someone. What's interesting is when he gets the drop on him and he convinces the guy to make it a draw with one gun in the middle of the table. And then he pulls the tablecloth so the gun falls in his lap instead of reaching for it and then shoots the guy. You're just like, oh, that's my hero. That's some protagonist energy. Whereas in Lancer, you're just like, my gun did better numbers and something happened to that guy. Or it's just really, or an even more egregious example is any kind of D20 fantasy game.
Yeah.
When you're
like
a
our
fucking
13th age campaign.
Yeah. When you're a wizard and like, that's an entire genre of story in RPGs. It's like, oh, I cast Swarm of Bugs at 200 feet above the air. Oh, I cast Animal Transform and turn them into elephants. And like, you're there to break reality. You're a wizard. Like it's in the job description. And it'd be like, actually, no, you can't do that. The rules say you don't, and he's got this power and that doesn't make sense. And then nothing happens. Yeah. Like it's just totally like, that's the thing. You're given all these choices on the back end, front loaded. Whereas what's actually going on the table when you should be feeling the combat is, well, you have to do this absolutely optimal thing because the dice still probably aren't going to work. And then nothing will happen anyway. It's very flat and like deletes like a lot of character agency. Whereas on the back end of like a lot of games, what you like, there's not much to choose. Like you got your action economy. Here's these things you can do. It's a very limited set. But where the variety comes in is like where an action scene should, like the setting, like the set piece,
the scenario.
Yeah. Whereas like it's a paradox because we've got a physical map of this, area right in front of us. Right.
Yeah. A map, a grid.
Yeah. I still remember that, final fight from the first arc of Heroes of New Arcadia. And we mapped it out a little, but it wasn't like a full grid map. No. I still remember where we entered and the plan we had to enter. I still remember Aaron flying up and getting himself killed multiple times and us having this. I still remember having to hold a shield as I was constantly being hit. I could draw a map of that fight now. Like, couldn't tell you anything about where we fought in Lancer. Was it a ship yard or a city?
The last fight was at a dock.
Maybe I don't know. I saw some boxes. I saw some boxes and failed to do things around them. Like you know what I mean? But like we drew a physical map out for that. Might as well not have ever existed in my head. We just talked about the other one. Memory That Lasts Forever was a really cool moment. Like and that's where I get off the boat on D20. I just don't think it creates what I want it to create out of that combat. I think its primary value is as I don't want to say closet drama because I don't think it creates a lot of drama, but like a closet game, like, which is fine. There's parts of the game. There's parts of the game I want you to play, like in Redmark. I want you to do shopping away from the table. Don't fucking bother me with that. Go home, grab a book, do your shopping. Like that's cool. Like that's fine. There's parts of you play at home, but like I feel like the choices are all in that part. And the choices at the table are, well, you need to do the tactically optimal thing because it's probably not going to work anyway. And that just falls real flat for me every time.
Now I feel like part of this discussion is the fact that, RPGs are still like, relatively speaking, like so new, right? We don't have like a critical language to describe them because like role-playing games encompass a lot of like activities that we all describe as role playing, but they're still different, like shopping for items and coming up with, and then like, in Letter Narrative Dissonance, we just reviewed Traveler recently. I haven't edited it yet, but like I think of the fun of Traveler is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, is when you make a character, you actually roll up careers and like what your character did before.
Yeah. Your life path.
Yeah. Similar to Cyberpunk, a life path system. There's random events that can happen to your character, like good things or bad things.
Dying character creation.
Not in the newest edition, but you can become
a damn shame.
You can become a prisoner and you don't know how long you'll be a prisoner. So like, and if you're too old, then your stats are going to be shitty because the anti-aging drugs are very expensive. So there, we know people who make characters for fun for RPGs, and that's a very common thing. And I feel like a lot of D20 thing is this like war/board game thing, because like if Lancer was delivered in a manner as a game like Gloomhaven, like a big ass board game with little figures and cards and all that stuff, and we just played it as a board game, we go, oh, that was fun, and like no one would have a problem with it because we didn't try to wrap a narrative around it, right? Like it is part Gloomhaven, tactical board game, part like storytelling game, and it's just there's this and we're all describing everything as being under this umbrella of role-playing games when they're really very different activities. I think that's part of the problem, is like a lot of D20 players want it in this exact format because and they don't want I don't know. So I feel like that's part of the problem, right? Is that we're trying to make things fit that don't fit together, right? And like if we just label D20 players as like board game players who want to do some storytelling, as opposed to like role players of like Delta Green or Eclipse Phase or Red Markets or whatever.
Well, I don't know, like, because I know there are people who don't want that. Like I know you do not really ascribe to the immerse me school of like, yeah, you did to this X-Files that, good job. And then you're on to the next person. Like, I like to describe what it looks like. I like to like create a visual story, and like that is something I feel like you have to do to make D20 combat not completely flat. But I feel like it's something that a lot of people don't want. Like, I'm including players and GMs. Like they just want to get on, move with the turn, keep it plugging. And I think that's perfectly fine. But like, if you don't want that and you want something, you can do that in a lot of like D20 systems like D&D. If you listen to any of those, big fancy APs, you'll have these long flourishing descriptions of how cool things exist in combat and look like that. Or if you do, Lancer, I certainly added some cool robot descriptions, or did the best I could while I was struggling with the rules. But like, there is almost nothing in the game. Like there's no procedure in the GM section. There's nothing said. Like in Red Markets, I just say this: if they succeed, they describe how they did it, and it can look cool or however they want. If they failed, I describe how it fucked up, and I can do whatever I want to do the damage. There's at least like a procedure, but like everything in D&D that you're adding to that, everything in Lancer, everything in all those D20 fantasies that you're adding to be like, oh, this is a story. Stories exist off images because humans only see the world through their senses. So I should make sentences that describe things that people see or smell or taste or touch or feel, because that is the only way humans gather information to do anything. That is all like, better know that, hope you took creative writing, bitch. Like that is it. Like it is all extracurricular. None of that's in the book. Everything's cut out. And so you're really just taking that from other games. Yeah. And like trying to install it in as like a supplementary vitamin for D20. Like an old person would have to take something to get all their calcium because like it's been around too long. Like, that's my other element. Like it never gives you a back end. Like, how do you make this look cool? And like there's an entire cottage industry for D&D. It's like how to make D&D combat not suck. Yeah. Here's all the things that aren't in D&D that make D&D combat not suck. And I just want to be like, what if that was in the handbook, man? Like, what if you just took a little time to be like, hey, whenever something gets hit, don't just say this many points. Yeah. Please say this as well, or all of these types of players will be. But it doesn't do that. And so it leads me to believe this long along the lifeline of D20 games, it's not because like they don't think, it's not because they forgot. Like, I think it's because it's not that type of game. They want to move it along, keep it clicking. Yeah. Yeah. There is this inertia, right? Like the D&D and D20, and by extension, D20 has been defined in this way that D20, is that's just the intrinsic nature of it. And to change, you can't really change it at this point. My numbers hit your numbers until we do numbers. The numbers. Well, it's also like there are these implications, right? Like the fact that D&D and D20 systems have like moving target numbers based on the enemy. Like Delta Green doesn't do that. Red Markets, like tons of games don't do that. They just say like, oh, to hit an enemy, you just make a skill check. And unless it follows the same rules as other skill checks, where like if it's a hard thing to do, then you get a penalty. If it's an easy thing to do, you get a bonus. But it's not like, Delta Green, you don't like, oh, the cult leader is,
you only have a 30% chance of hitting the cult leader because they're a cult leader and that they're a more dangerous adversary. It's not the intrinsic nature of the cult leader, right? Like, and some of these assumptions I think could be questioned to sort of mitigate that. Like, I mean, 13th Age, a lot of 13th Age's design is trying to create workarounds for this nature, like the whole escalation die thing, right? Is just how do we deal with fights where everyone just rolls shitty for 10 rounds in a row? And the thing is that actually happens in like standard Call of Cthulhu, like in Delta Green. Like one of our older one of the fights I will never forget playing with you is the dog punching incident. Which wasn't even RPPR. It was the Unspeakable Oath. And that was where Tom was running a game and you were...
I wasn't even in the scene.
Yeah, you were just watching. I think it was David trying to punch a dog out.
David and Aaron trying to punch 2 German Shepherds.
Yeah.
And I drew a mural.
Yeah.
Because it took an hour and a half of game time to punch 2 dogs.
Yeah. And normally what mitigates that usually in Call of Cthulhu type games is the characters have 8 hit points. So 10 hit points. So like you only need to hit once to take them out. And but yet somehow that was the only time I can remember that happening in a Call of Cthulhu type game, as opposed to every other D20 fight. I guess if you were in charge of a new D20 game and you gun to the head, you have to design a D20 combat system. Like how would you address some of these changes, or like what would you change if you had to?
I would try and do something similar to Red Mark. I'd try to make as much stuff player facing as possible.
Okay.
I would try and make as many rolls out of the GM's hand as I possibly could. Mm-hmm. I would prefer you failed to dodge than I succeeded to hit you. Mm-hmm. I would prefer you succeeded hitting me.
Yeah.
Then I failed my NPC dodge roll from like 50 different stats. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that is much stronger. And I think there are a lot of very easy and extremely predictable on a probability curve ways to alter those difficulties without having to remember more stats or add more NPCs or. Yeah,
I do like the Powered by the Apocalypse paradigm of like, when you fight, if you succeed, you hit and they hit you back. Like it's just, and if you roll well, then you don't get hit, or you can choose to do more damage. Like you have that choice.
Yeah. And like people get on me for like hit locations as being very 80s in Red Markets, but like there's hit locations in Monsters and other childish things and like things like that. And like the thing is about a hit location is that it is a procedure for describing numbers v numbers, and it's not a complex one like 10 killing to the arm, like, well, I know what story that tells. Like, and it's going to be dramatic, and it's going to cause you to engage with the setting, and it's going to give your character description of what's going on with them. And it's like building a story that a human being who has been hurt before, if not that specific way, can at least somewhat relate to, can act around, can role play around. So a lot of that back end stuff that people are bringing in from other games, like, well, you need a cool action area to do your action thing for, like, I don't know, D&D help YouTube channel 872 or however many there are. Like, yeah, because the combat exists to describe a space. Like you are actually building the setting or altering the setting of your story by doing that. So I would add things like that. Like I would make sure there's set pieces. I would make sure there's stunting. I would make sure there's systems to reward cleverness. Yeah. When I designed the Red Markets War rules, which are going to have to be rewritten because second edition. But Jason Brown did a great job. Like, that's all you do. Everything's a set piece. Oh, you want increased numbers? Cool. Describe that thing that's going to be on the battlefield. And now if you want to do that, you got to get there and turn it on, or you got to protect it, or you got to do that. Or if you want these people to do this thing for you and get this bonus, you got to tell me what you say to them. You got to show yourself leading them. Like, I don't want it to just be my numbers hit your numbers and we do numbers. Like, that is boring. So yeah, I think you could do some stuff to keep it fast by making it player facing, But I think the main thing is you got to take all that stuff that people have been kludging and like stapling to D20 on the back end. You
just got to start over, yeah.
I don't even know if that's true, but you got to take all that stuff that people have been kludging and back ending from other games to make D20 combat more engaging. And you got to make that like, hey, if you are the GM, it's your job to learn how to do this. Mm-hmm. You have to learn to say these things. Just like they'll suggest, like, do a funny voice for an NPC if it's your first time ever. It's got to be like, hey, no one gets hit by a sword and says, well, oh, well, moving on. Like you got to give it some stakes.
But what else are D&D YouTubers going to talk about if not ways to describe being hit by things? Like, and like do hit points represent meat, or do they just represent your ability to avoid injury? And those discussions are endless. They've gone back 20 or 40 years at this point.
And I know, and just like if you're going to keep publishing new editions of this shit, like I'm talking about D&D specifically, but if you're doing a D20 game, it's not new editions. But if you're going to do that, just make it a procedure.
Yeah,
a procedure is a rule. It's not something anyone's going to like do rules lawyering about. Like a procedure is roll initiative first.
Yeah,
that's a procedure. Like there's initiative rules that come after that and your bonuses and all that kind of stuff like that. But the procedure part of like we do this part first and then we do this second, that is easy to remember. No one ever argues about that shit. And so you can just be like, hey, you rolled this, so you get to describe what happens. Or I rolled this and I get to describe what happens. Or or you could do the yes and like 7 through 9 from Blades in the Dark and Power in the Apocalypse. Like, oh, this happens, but here's my complication. Like there's any number of ways you could just say like, it's my responsibility here to describe this. It's your responsibility there. And that's not hard. Like you just keep giving the GM veto power. And as long as they're not an asshole, it should work out fine. Right. But like, you're just going to put that map on the table and everyone's going to be like, well, I literally inch forward and then I miss. And like, that is going to be an entire turn for someone for 40 fucking minutes. Like, and that is brutal.
Yeah.
God, that's brutal.
Yeah. I mean, I remember you were saying like, I would rather at least something happen if I failed than nothing. Like,
I would rather be horribly harmed or killed in that matter. Like if for being that shitty at doing it, like that at least tells a story of the worst mech pilot ever. And I would want to hear that, but like there's just nothing for you if you miss that roll, and it's going to take forever to come back around.
Yeah, I do say also with Solstice Reign, a lot of the enemy combos, like the GM has this advice, the section of the book, like, oh, here's combos you can do with these types of enemies, but like a lot of the times it didn't work out because the terrain, like, oh, they gave me a lot of very slow enemies with a movement rate of 2 to 4 squares, and the battle map is like 32 by 36 squares. Like it's ridiculous. And oh, this enemy can teleport this enemy, and I look it up as, oh, this enemy, oh, that has a range of 5 squares, and the enemy, and they move like 3 squares. So it's like, okay, I can't really do that because well,
the D20 thing for me is like all of these things can be fixed by a good DM, like a skilled DM that knows the rules and that has trained the players well on the rules, can compensate for all this stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is with D20 combat, as opposed to other things, like that's not a factor you can factor in.
Yeah.
Like, so for instance, my book's too long. Nobody wants to read Red Mark. It's too long. And then the big criticism is like barrier to entry. It's too hard to learn, too big of a barrier entry, stuff like that. Because they don't read it, they don't know all the variable rules are in there. They don't know, do all the whole thing. They don't care. It's too big, and that in itself is a fault on it. Okay, I will take that. I will accept that learning and teaching your game to other people is a valid criteria with which to judge a game. If I have to get my creative writing degree and learn from all these other games that aren't the game I'm currently playing, in addition to all of the variable rules for the NPCs I'm using to assault you with, in addition to creating a map, in addition to getting minifigs so we can track things on the map, in addition to you learning your player, in addition to learning your player options, in addition to knowing your action economy, me instructing you on that, learning what to roll, learning what my roles in conjunction is your role, then bringing in all those other things from the game. The thing is, in D20, you cannot say, well, that's a fault of the system. That's just too much. No one's going to get good at combat until you're 15 sessions in, and then no one is going to want to play anymore because they've had to play 15 sessions of bad combat. That's just like, oh, get a better DM.
Yeah.
And that is the hand wavium that I see for all this D20 stuff. Oh, well, it's because they didn't know the rules well enough. They didn't have system mastery. They didn't have this. But for D20, as opposed to like pretty much any other new game in the market, it's just like, well, yeah, of course, you'll get good, scrub. Whereas everything else is just like, if there's any barrier to entry, it's a fault on the author and you should be ashamed. Whereas if it's a fantasy D20 game, it is you should have invested more time in learning multi-classing or this or that or the other. And that's a culture thing I don't understand. That's the thing that's really grandfathered in for me. Just the fact that like it is never even interrogated that you have to drag in all this other stuff to make it interesting for a big subset of the gaming community. It's never even interrogated as a thing that should be addressed. It's just a thing you're expected to do, which is why if you're doing any kind of game mastering for a D20 system, it is so much more resource intensive for the person running it. You have to keep too many plates in the air, in my opinion. Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of putting it, because again, the board, just the way a deadly enemy in a D20 system is described versus any other system, as we were mentioning, because they have so many stats and abilities and combos with other characters as well. Like that's the thing in the Lancer is like, oh, this enemy can do this in conjunction with this other enemy, and like their abilities synergize in this way. So I had to pay attention to all of these combos and things, and they're contextual, right, based on where you are, the players are, the state of the battlefield, and like the scenario situation or the scenario type. Like there are variable win conditions for different fights. So I should mention my idea the idea I've kind of spitballed for fixing D20, which, as we're both, fans and ardent readers of Clausewitz, war is made up of two elements, maneuver and slaughter. So I was thinking of like some sort of D20 system where the die you roll represents how much maneuver and slaughter, we'll just call them that, each round. So how much you can move and position yourself and how much damage you can inflict. And so like every round you get a variable amount of resources to spend on various actions. I hadn't quite figured out the mechanics, but I think that would be the idea, is that the D20 is not whether or not you succeed, but like what kinds of things you can do that round. And I think that would be interesting, but it's a very different paradigm than everything else. I'd have to kind of start over and like figure it out. Maybe you roll a die, 2D20, one for each of the two stats, and that's your how much you can do that round. Like, and I wouldn't even call it fixed, because nothing survives this long if people aren't playing it and enjoying it. And like I said at the front, I don't think there are flaws in the design so much as just what the design does and what the design isn't supposed to do. Yeah. But that said, like, I don't see how the D20 combat gets you anywhere you want to be based on a modern RPG design or combat. I think it paints a better story, makes you more engaged in the setting, makes your characters feel cooler and more like practical and fun. And I think the D20 can't match that, but I also don't think D20 can make a good action scene you would imagine in a movie. I don't think D20 can write an fun fight chapter in your fantasy novel you're reading, because it just doesn't engage enough. People do though. I know it can do that when they add that stuff. People, how many fantasy novels have been written based on someone's D&D campaign? Yeah, but based on it by completely adding in all the things D20 doesn't have, because they don't just put the numbers in there. Yeah. Like they have to describe what the spell looks like, things D&D refuses to do. Oh, I do phase. I remember this from Dark Sun. I do phase slide, and I was new to RPG, and I'm like, what's a phase slide? And you're just like, oh, it lets my character move here to here. And I said, yeah, but no, what is a phase slide? Like, what does that look like? Do you teleport? Do you go invisible? And you looked at me like I'd ask you to drop your pants in the middle of the table. I was like, you just used magic. What does the magic look like? And you're just like, I don't even understand what you've just said to me. Because it's just not accounted for. It's just like, I'm trying to keep track of 8 enemies or whatever, and all their abilities. I'm trying to keep all this complicated. You weren't even running it. That was somebody else's game. Your character did it. And you're just like, I don't even, what do you process? I move 8 squares. Yeah. I'm here now. And I was just looking at you baffled, because I just don't. why would you be able to do magic if I'm not going to be able to describe what it even looks or feels or sounds like? And like, just look at those spell lists. Like, yeah, color blast. Okay, that's what? It's a blast of colors, and there's nothing to be like, well, you could describe it this way or that way, or it could do this or that. But there's just, that's all like things you got to add yourself, like things you got to add on the back end. That's not there.
I'm sure there's a YouTube video, how to describe color blast.
Exactly. Put it in the fucking book. Put it in the book where the people need to get the rules to play the game. Like, or at least give them an improv framework, or who gets to describe what the color blast looks like. Anything. That's all negative space in the design.
Yeah.
And like, negative space is good in design if it gets filled in. But I feel like once you put that grid on the table, everyone's just like, oh, we drew a map. We don't have to fill anything in. Yeah. And it just becomes, my D20 versus your D20. Yeah. And it's agonizingly boring.
I mean, there are large numbers of players, that are uncomfortable improvising things. I tried to play storytelling games with some people who had panic attacks because they couldn't make up a word or something like that.
Yeah.
I think D&D
and I think D&D and D20 works great for that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying it's not wrong with it. But if you're trying to make it do things, I just don't think the technology was ever designed to do that. It was still,
literally a war game. Yeah. Direct.
Yeah. It was founded too early to war games, and it's too similar to a war game. And all the kludge stuff is great because, adding those things, making those new systems that created a more rich and detailed and engaging story is how we get indie games, because it all evolved out of that bullshit. So I'm not saying it's bad to do those things, but trying to add all that into a D20 combat when you could just throw it out all together and get that new experience, I feel like, that's very much a discussion you need to have with your players about what type of game we want to play.
Yeah. And it's okay to want more things from your game.
And I want something very different from a game that's going to have combat than anything D20 provides. Because the only thing I see when you say D20 combat is I am going to have to do homework. And my grade for that homework is going to be a randomly assigned number between 1 and 20, because there's no tactical choice I can make
that which will survive a bad roll.
That will survive the bad roll. And it will be utterly randomized from there. And that just feels impotent to me. I don't care for that as a character to play. The same reason I don't want to play in branded universes. I don't want to be the second most interesting person in the story. That's not an exciting pitch for me when you're just do you want to play in the DC Heroes universe and be a scrub that Superman
has to save ever
flies over without noticing? I'm no, what if we just didn't carry money for the WB and told a different, cooler story? Same thing in D20. I don't know why I want to do all this homework to go out there and suck when I could go out there and suck interestingly in a different game or go out there and actually maybe do something good. Yeah.
We have mentioned some I've mentioned some combat systems I like. Are there, and Wild Talents was another one. Yeah. Cause I still remember that here's a new Arcadia 5. Are there any other RPGs with combat systems you do like that we haven't mentioned so far?
I think we've mentioned a few, and I don't want to say there's a ton of problems with using ore for combat.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's
super slow. Especially when you get multiple.
Super slow unless you're using an app that's pulling out all your successes for you, and there's tons of stuff. But I like it better because it activates the senses more. There's a hit location. There's a variability of power level. There's status effects. There's things that let me see it happening or feel it happening, as opposed to one big old HP number that either goes up or down depending on what happens. So I'm not saying that other combat systems, even the ones I've designed, don't have foibles and fuck ups and problems. Yeah. I'm just saying that those are more interesting for if you like a story out of a game than a lot of those other strategic choices.
Yeah. And also as a note, some people could talk about your clip how how's that different from Delta Green, where if you roll bad, your character's going to get killed? Well, in Delta Green, the whole point is not to necessarily get into combat in the first place. And like your choices in Delta Green matter far more than in D20 because, it's
not like Delta Green is never hiding those stakes.
Yeah.
Like, because it's the real world. And you know what I do to win combat in the real world? I don't get into gunfights.
Yeah.
I, in fact, go very far out of my way to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's the setting. Like, I think
it's thematic. Yeah.
That tells the story.
But like having a game about heroic fantasy where like instead of like, aha, I am no man, and then you stab the Witch King and then you have to stab him 12 more times.
Yeah, because there's no mechanic for violating ancient prophecy.
Yeah.
Because there's no stun.
Oh, well, you get a plus 20 to hit him. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you only have to stab him 6 times, actually. It's only going to take 7 rounds. It'll be a quick fight. Yeah.
Agonizing.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Oh, well, she just rolled a crit. Okay, yeah, no, that's, again, not the point. Yeah.
And again, you talk about negative design, like space, like... Part of negative design space is a stunting mechanic because like you add the mechanic like, but most of mechanics in that regard are just like the DM can add a certain bonus to a roll if you have described doing something that would add an effect on this. Like most of them aren't even like fixed values.
Yeah.
Most of them aren't even like contextual anyway. It's just like, hey, if that sounds like it would work, and you make a roll to do it so it's not just automatic, right? Or you've set it up beforehand, or you make your athletics roll to get up to that thing, or you make your rig test to turn on the sentry gun or whatever. That is your combat roll, but it's going to add a cool thing because you're clever and you've added to the space.
Yeah.
I think not having that is a huge mistake, especially for something D20, because it's all about tactics. But what you're saying is like, it's all about tactics in an utterly prescribed mathematical simulation that can accept 0 variables, which isn't tactics. Like Rome's didn't have a counter to the elephant. That's why it was a good strategy. Like the guy who brought the elephant to the fight won because they didn't have the elephant strategy. Like that is how actual clever things in combat work.
Yeah, when the conquistadors landed in the Aztec Empire, they were like, it wasn't balanced. Yeah, it was not about. They had smallpox and like cannons and like things, and it was pretty. And,
I mean, things didn't work out for Ned Kelly in the end there, but like, I bet the first time a guy comes out in a man tank, I bet that was a pretty big force multiplier in that bank robbery. And that is not something in the rules of robbing an Australian like small town bank. But like a clever player came up with that, and I think it should be like rewarded because it tells a story you still tell hundreds of elites later, as opposed to like the guy who just went in there on a horse and got shot. Like, we don't know that guy's name. We know the guy who made the man tank, and like let your players do that shit.
Yeah, that's kind of another assumption of D20, isn't it? Is that like every encounter is something you're supposed to, like if the GM throws a bunch of enemies at you, you are assumed that you can defeat them, right? Like, which is obviously not the case in say Delta Green or Red Markets, where if there's like
the stakes are different.
Yeah, the stakes are like every combat is supposed to be you're supposed to defeat them. You're not supposed to run away or avoid them unless it's like an army. Like it published adventures like here's this room with these monsters and these monsters and these monsters, and then you have the boss. That's the assumption. Like not like there's if you go to this one, but you know what I mean. Yeah,
I just if I like a storied combat, I want like the fact that like one character's like an Alexander or a Napoleon or a Boudicca or like a tactical genius or one character is like the Badgers in Redwall, just an insane force multiplier who is the center of the battle and other things revolve around. Those tell stories and like they have effects and agency on people. But like a D20 match is like a UFC fight.
Yeah.
Everyone's in the same fucking weight class. Everyone's been training at the same amount of time. They all have daddy issues. They all know BJJ. They all are going to try this. And then when they try that, the other guy's going to try this hold. And it just becomes
technical.
It becomes fight math, and it's not engaging. Like, I know UFC has, like, John Jones will occasionally pull a spinning heel kick or something he saw on YouTube, and it works. But, like, most of the time, it is just like two guys rolling around sweaty dick punching, and that is a D20.
That's what it's about. Yeah. Technical exercise. Yeah, not a narrative like combat. Yeah, conflict where that's actually the best point. Yeah. What is your fight? What is your combat system like? Is it supposed to be UFC or is it supposed to be at the Hannibal and the Elephants?
At the end of it, are we going to be able to tell a story about what happened, or are we going to get a highlight reel where they cut out all the boring stuff around it? That's D20.
Yeah, that's it.
D20. The most you're going to get is a highlight reel. Yep. Oh, I got a crit. Everything else is going to have to go on the cutting room floor because it's boring as fucking shit.
Yeah.
Whereas you can like film the battle of something that has a narrative
exploit
arc.
One weird trick the GM couldn't allow in, and like we turned the insects into elephants and dropped them on our foes. And
I mean, it's the same thing. Like when I forget her name, but like when the Russian lady who had her whole family killed, like Red Waiting was based loosely off of it. And then she invites all the guys over and murders them. And she goes to the other town and she gifts them all doves. And then attacks burning coal to burn the city down. That's a 1-round combat. Yeah. When you send the fire doves to set your enemy on fire and enslave them, that sounds like a 1-round crit success combat. It's still going to talk about it. I'm now terrified of that character for all of her, sinister machinations.
It's not because she has improved initiative and all these other feats.
It told an interesting story.
It's not a level 18 killer. Yeah.
But if you go to the UFC match and it lasts 1 round, you're pissed. The commenters are talking about how everyone in the crowd is disappointed. The book guys are talking about how everybody's disappointed. Like they're on ESPN talking about how everyone's disappointed in it. And then if it goes to decision because it went too many rounds, you're in the exact same situation. Right. Like, there wasn't a climax that any of us found satisfying, so I'm going to talk about how this guy really should have won, and you're going to talk about how inconclusive it was, and it's just not what I'm looking for.
You don't want like if the combat system is too complex and too in depth, like do you want like to try and do storytelling while you're playing in between rounds of Magic the Gathering, right? Like, are you trying to that's the same kind of thing, like that's no.
People. I saw a webcomic.
Is it a sport or a narrative? Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a webcomic once that was claiming that all sports is just a gigantic probability function that people are desperately trying to assign narratives to.
Yeah.
And that becomes harder or easier depending on what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's why so much about sports coverage is like back end shit. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, the Cardinals are really shitty this year. Mm-hmm. But why? Is so-and-so going through a divorce? Oh, there's stuff going on with the agency. Oh, the owners are doing this and they're having a player revolt. And then of course there's a risk of a strike. And so it becomes like they start telling a story about Succession because the game's fucking boring. Because they're so desperate to assign something to the numbers of like, they got 0 runs again. Mm-hmm. Because they have to fill the fucking space. But D20 doesn't give you any tool to do that in your commentary of your game. Like if the numbers don't end up interesting on random chance, you're just stuck doing it for 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And
why people watch wrestling. It is narrative.
Yeah. It's a narrative.
Yeah, give me pro wrestling, not UFC. That's what I would say.
But not fixed. Like let's some kind of randomization so we don't know who wins.
Yeah. I mean, wrestling's surprising for the audience at least. Like even though they know it's not real, I assume all your players know you're not really fighting anyone. So you don't really have to worry about kayfabe on that regard. You just have to be, surprising and interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Some really interesting insights into differences in game design philosophy, really, when you come down to it. Like, what are the assumptions? What are the unspoken assumptions about your game? And like, what does it mean? Like, why are you playing this game? What is fun for it? Fun about it. A lot of the stuff that we don't really examine. Really interesting insight there. If you thought this was interesting, let us know in the comments, or quote us on. Add us on whatever social media platforms we're on by the time you're listening to this. And when we come back, we'll have some shout outs. And we're back. And we have some shout outs, as with most RPPR episodes. I'll begin with a board game that we have all played, Deadly Dowagers. This was actually something Maddie discovered online a couple months ago, so we got a copy. It's only $35, and Deadly Dowagers is a game of matrimony and murder. You were playing a Victorian era woman trying to marry up to get to the, I believe it's the Duke. That is your ultimate goal, is to marry the Duke. But in order to do that, you have to have a dowry. You have to have so much money on hand in order to marry him. And what you do is you marry a dude, and then once you marry him, you can then murder him, and that will raise your reputation. And if your reputation is too high, you can't marry certain dudes. The Duke, I think you have to have a reputation of 9 or less. You can lower your reputation through a charity and getting.
I thought it was infamy or something like that.
There is some sort of score you want to keep low.
Yeah, there's the method of killing them adds a certain number to your infamy or your bad reputation score.
Yeah.
Whereas killing them through inheritance adds to your money or income, and that's your requirement. Like, you need a minimum income to marry this guy, but you'd have a maximum infamy. And it's about killing your way to the top without being seen as the Black Widow you are. Yeah.
The main mechanic is a drafting mechanic where every round everyone gets a hand of cards, but you only pick one, then pass it on until you get down to like one card each, and then you discard the last one. So you have to figure out what you want. There are certain cards that let you murder for a lower reputation, like they're more discreet forms of murder, like hunting accident, or for some reason Derringer is pretty discreet. I mean, apparently strangling your husband while he sleeps is the worst thing. You can always do that. You can always strangle him. So you have, and then there's also matrimony cards, so you can marry a new dude, or you can elope, but that also raises your reputation. Oh, how dare you? And certain husbands give you different abilities. Like, some will let you use charity cards for free, and some will give you a bonus to this or that. And it's a lot of fun. You can play from like 3 to 6 players, which is nice. Not a lot of games do that. It's a lot of fun because, again, there's this narrative element. Like, my strategy is just marry as many dudes as possible. Marry and kill them. Just one right after the other. Just an assembly line. Don't build them up, because you can also
a lot of cards fatten the cow before you take it to slaughter.
You can invest in your husband to get a better payoff. You can raise their rank and then get a better payoff later on. But I was like, nah.
But you're going to lose all that once not your holdings, but yeah.
I have a lot of fun with it. It's a good game for a lot of players. It's the right level of depth that you like. There's some complexity to it, but it's not like a terraforming Mars or something like that. Yeah, it's definitely like a mid-level game. I don't know. Any thoughts on it, Caleb? Because you're one of the people I played with.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's sort of like Revenge of Marrying Mr. Darcy.
Thematically,
it's like the end game of marrying Mr. Darcy over and over and over again, and you just piling up dead husbands.
Oh yeah, whenever you murder a husband, you flip them over and revealing their gravestone. That stays near at your play area. So every subsequent husband means you get more reputation. You get more.
Because everyone's looking back and like, isn't that her like 4th marriage? Like, it gets harder as you go on and fill your graveyard full of dead husbands.
It's a fun game. And again, it's also a little game. Like, it's a tiny box and it's mostly cards. So very portable. You can play it at a bar or cafe, and it's easy to teach. So just a good mid-level game. Okay, what's your first shout out?
I've been reading a new book series by Becky Chambers, I believe is her name. It's the Monk and Robot trilogy. They're on the second one, just came out. The first one is A Psalm for the Wild Built, and the second one is called A Prayer for the Crown Shy. But I don't read a lot of like bright, happy, fuzzy things, so I've been trying to correct that. And this has been described to me by others as hope punk. I don't know what the author would describe it, but it is largely utopian in its setup. Basically, it's a sci-fi world that has undergone a horrific climate change that was circumvented by the fact that all of the robots became sentient. And rather than destroying humanity, they said, we're not going to do your work anymore, and you got to turn off all this shit. Also, this part of the planet is ours. Don't come in it, or we will kill you. And they just retreated into the woods and let humanity figure it out. And the premise is that there is a non-binary monk named Sibling Dex who gets tired of their life doing tea service, which is like a combination of therapy and religion over a tea ceremony that they do by, driving an electric bike with a little tea caravan around the solar punk, like new utopia that humans have had to build in the wake of this horrible die-off that they cause with their own technology. And they've got these like utopian anarcho-commune villages and all this kind of stuff. But he gets off the beaten path and goes into the woods where you're not supposed to go because like no one's seen a robot in hundreds of years. No one goes there because it's considered wild space, just like to build oxygen and like to do the water table, like your stuff and he meets a robot that wants to come check in on humanity. And then they go on adventures, Sibling Dex and the robot. So the way they do artificial intelligence is pretty interesting in the book. And it's very heartwarming and good story. So I like it so far. They're also very short, extremely like barely 120 pages.
Oh, wow. Yeah, little novellas. Really.
Little thin chap books is how they're selling. It might have been one book and then they split it into 3, which sucks, but it doesn't read like it. They are self-contained stories. So
sounds a bit like the opposite of that other robot thing. Was about the killbot or whatever.
Martha Wells actually does a quote on it.
Oh, okay.
And recommended the book, which is how I found it.
So. Oh, okay. Yeah. Martha Wells is the author of that. I can't remember the name of the series, but
Murderbot Diaries.
Murderbot Diaries.
It is not Murderbot Diaries.
It is the opposite.
But it is
the polar opposite of it's still robots, but other than that, yeah. Nice. That sounds fun. I actually kind of want to check those out now. My next one is also about happy things, very happy and normal things. It is a Amazon Prime series called Shiny Happy People, which is about the Duggar family. It's a 4-part miniseries about the worst people you probably heard of because they had that 19 and counting reality TV show, well, multiple shows, and it's about family members revealing the truth about the family and how they're horrible, and also the I forgot the name of it, but the evangelical not church, but like learning service, whatever it was that they were into, the father was into, and all the abuses that this institution has of people. So it's about,
we can say child sex trafficking cult.
Yeah.
I'll say it. Yeah. Child sex trafficking cult. Yeah.
Yeah. Another one of those things where the leader was, doing some really horrible things. And one of the Duggars was, and it's just, insight into like horrible people doing horrible things and the aftermath of it. But it's on Amazon Prime. It's a fascinating series revealing this just awful. Like Maddie had not been aware of this at all because the Duggar family was not a thing in Australia, but like, boy, it was really omnipresent for a while in American pop culture, and it's just wholesome and just, oh gosh, they all love each other.
One of the many crimes in which the TLC has wrought upon our society.
Boy, it has, hasn't it?
The Learning Channel has taught us dark, dark lessons.
Yeah. So yeah, that is my second one. What's yours?
I watched a movie called How to Blow Up a Pipeline, based off the book of the same name. The book is by Andreas Malm, I believe his name is, and it is a argument for the necessity of ecoterrorism. I'll let you take that on its own. And the book's been very popular, but they made a film for it, and the film is not just a documentary; it is a fictional film. Mm-hmm. And it goes over an attempt to blow up a pipeline by a group of young people. And I think they do a fantastic job for a lot of reasons. A lot of the people are not trained actors, but I think they turned in okay performances. But like it's unique in a lot of ways in that, I don't think they changed anything about how to build a bomb. Like, they don't tell you what they're mixing. They don't tell you like how the proportions to put it in, but like they show you how you'd make a bomb and how you'd need to set it up and how you'd need to set it up on a pipeline to make sure there wasn't a spill. So you'd have to check out the elevation and how you'd need to strap it to it and like things you'd need to be concerned about.
Tradecraft.
Yeah, tradecraft shit. Like they're all working off like shitty Gmail printouts because they don't want their phones there and like doing OPSEC. But I also think they do some things by like they show that it is going to have to be like a multi-political coalition. Like one guy's a hayseed Republican asshole who's doing it because it's across his land. The other guy is an indigenous kid who's had his whole community ruined by like fracking shit. And he's just like, it's this or school shooting, man. Let's build a bomb. Like he's just a complete nihilist. Like 2 or 3 of them are like super privileged, like Occupy Wall Street college kids, like, and they're all having to like get along because they're making a rainbow alliance of blowing up a fossil fuel infrastructure. But I thought it was a very good way to do agitprop for that book by just, talking about, well, here's the reality of it. Some of you are going to prison. You will be hurt. They will try and kill you. Like this is what will be happening. And they don't really flinch away from any part of the story, which I thought made it a more interesting film for certain.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. It sounds fascinating.
There's a great scene where they're trying to get a 55-gallon drum of ammonium nitrate strapped to the underside of this pipeline with like ratchet ties. And it's a bunch of like weak ass college kids trying to lift this hundreds of pound explosives up there. And they're just like, can we just put it under it? It's like, if you want to make a big hole in the ground and leave the pipeline fine, that's not how explosives work. It's got to be attached. And they're trying to do it like before people come by. And it gets very into the details. So I thought it was very well done. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of great, drama. There's the procedural and there's character conflict, right? But like great drama has both, right? Like, people are trying to do something very difficult. And like, that's like, Kurosawa films also had a lot of that. Like it was these flawed characters trying to do things, but also it showed like how fighting worked back then.
And they don't skimp away from it. Like they found their biome expert on TikTok because he was just doing dumb shit like posting building bombs online.
Yeah.
Because like how else are you going to find somebody in the modern day and age? Like he's shitty at it. He's blown himself up in various ways multiple times and he's terrified of doing it. But I think they don't skimp away. No one's a mastermind. No one's a super spy. Like I think they don't skimp away from it. So I think that's good.
I mean, like think about like, the Seven Samurai, like the Seven Samurai is like, why are we fighting, risking our lives for rice? And then there's also like, how the fuck are we going to defend this village? It's these two elements, and like that what's make it a great movie. So this sounds like a great one too. Speaking of fighting, my last shout out is a YouTuber, Napoleon Blown Apart, who does MMA and combat sports video essays. And he does this series called Worst of the Worst. And I've watched 2 of them so far. Each one's about an hour and a half long. And one was on the history of freak show fights, like not just Logan Paul and other YouTubers fighting, professional boxers.
So all boxing now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but he talks about the history of like Muhammad Ali versus the karate champion and things of that nature and early MMA. He also does one on the power slap and the history. And they don't mention slap fighting, the one near, Branson, but like other things. There's other like freakish, tethered. It used to be called, the first name of this was in the 90s. There was World Tether Fighting, which they changed the name of to like, I forgot what the name was changed to, but it was like literally tie 2 dudes together to a table and they can arm wrestle or they can punch each other or kick. And it didn't last very long, weirdly enough, but some people like it. So anyways, it's just fascinating of just like seeing the worst dredges of combat sports and all the weird things that happen therein. So good, lots of good clips, lots of good commentary. I like it. So any others?
I was gonna do Aliens: Dark Descent, but it's very buggy even on PS5, which should be able to run it as like a sub process considering
its graphics.
It's just XCOM with one type of aliens, multiple type of aliens. And the later part of the game is what lost its spot for me because it's basically a stealth game to optimally get through it after later levels. And that is just boring to me.
Yeah.
Especially from an RTS perspective. But what I'm going to replace it with is what I'm playing anyway, even though it is a far more small
One type of alien. Yeah.
It's definitely Starship Troopers Extermination.
I actually just got that. I played a couple hours on it. Yeah.
Oh man, you want to play when I go home right now? Because I will.
I have some podcasts to edit, but yeah, I will play tonight. Yeah.
But yes, I like that game way more than I should for being basically not a game.
Yeah.
You go, it's the same level every time. There's bugs on it. You have 3 character classes. You got to gather materials. Once you've gathered all the materials, you go to the base, you build the base.
I like building the base. It's kind
and then when you turn it on, you just see if you survive or if you get overrun like the Mormons in Starship Troopers. And it's hilarious every time. Like if people build a shitty base and we get overrun, it's very funny. I laugh. If we just hold the line, it's very funny. I laugh. They've added mutators in.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you get mutators to just like ambush, ambush, ambush. It's just constantly dying. And you have like an attrition rate in the hundreds. It's hilarious and stupid. And there are many times where you don't even have to aim. There's so many of them on the screen.
Yeah. I've only played on normal difficulty so far, so I haven't like seen how wild it can get. But yeah, it does look fun. Yeah. I do like the way they do base building. It's very slick, easy. Any character class can do it. And
yeah. You've got like 8 possible things you can build so far. And it's just, they give you a build zone around the thing you need to protect. And it's just, you can put whatever, and it costs this many resources. But everyone can put shit there. So they put shit in your way, and they put shit in dumb places. And once you build it, it takes forever to unbuild it. And
that's weird. I don't understand that.
oh, it's hilarious is what it is everyone starts screaming on the mic at the guy who put the bunker way out there, and then we all get eaten. It's very, very fun for me if you're not being sweaty and try hard about it.
Yeah. I might also get battle bits. I've seen that. That seems pretty interesting. Have you seen that?
Oh, I'm very interested in Battle Bit as well. The 254.
Yeah,
Roblox does
Roblox Battlefield. Yeah, basically.
Hey, they can't do Battlefield worse than Battlefield.
Yeah.
But yeah, fuck all those other complex games. Play Starship Troopers. Shoot bugs. Yeah.
I do need to beat Tears of the Kingdom, but that will be a while because there's just so much to do.
I gave up.
Yeah.
I just got so tired of it. I put it down. I don't think I'll ever pick it up.
I will pick it up again.
Ganondorf continues to rule Hyrule.
He does, but not forever. But yeah. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening. Again, check out Delta Green Dead channels and Heaven on Open Game Design and the RPPR YouTube channel. I'll actually might just put this episode up early to plug it. And we'll be talking to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, it's Ross Payton. I am doing a sound check, and it's just great. Caleb loves it. Don't you, Caleb?
Yes.
Keep talking.
Why are there 2 triggers on all the AKs?
On the...
Have we answered that? Has that ever been established?
Yeah, they do have 2 triggers.
Yeah, there's one inside the trigger guard, and there's one outside of it, and that seems odd.
Yeah, stylistic aesthetic thing. Yeah, I've not looked up the background. Like I would be curious about the numbers.
Steven Seagal saying swapping shoulders like all good.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. We're getting levels. Do you want to talk a little more?
I will.
Okay.
Regardless of whether I want to or not.
Aw.
I'm compelled.
Yeah. All right. We did it.